What would you do if you were accused of stealing, despite doing nothing wrong? How would you react if the truth about your past as a decorated military general suddenly came to light? What happens when your life is flipped upside down by a single accusation? Can you rise above and turn the tables? Find out in this shocking tale of injustice, redemption, and transformation. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories. Miguel Cruz stepped into the Imperial Towers Hotel every morning as the sun began to rise over Los Angeles. His shift, like every other, started early, before the guests and staff filled the lavish lobby, before the whirl of activity consumed the grandeur of the building. The marble floors of the lobby gleamed in the early light, untouched by the rush of footfalls. It was in this serene environment that Miguel, dressed in his simple housekeeping uniform, moved with quiet precision. His movements were deliberate, and while his presence often went unnoticed, there was something undeniably graceful about the way he worked. Despite the hustle and bustle around him, Miguel maintained a calm, almost stoic demeanor as he wiped down surfaces, polished brass fixtures, and swept the expansive floor. To the regular guests and staff who passed by him, Miguel was simply another one of the hotel's invisible workers, someone whose sole purpose was to maintain the pristine appearance of the hotel without any fanfare or recognition. His uniform, with its simple white shirt and navy blue slacks, blended in perfectly with the other cleaners who moved about the lobby. But there was more to Miguel Cruz than met the eye. Beneath his modest appearance, Miguel carried with him a story that few knew, and even fewer could have guessed. What most people at the Imperial Towers didn't realize was that Miguel wasn't just an ordinary hotel cleaner. For years, he had quietly put aside his past, embracing a new life far from his homeland of the Philippines. It wasn't that he wanted to forget his past. In fact, his past was something he was incredibly proud of. Miguel had once been a decorated general in the Philippine Army, a respected leader known for his exceptional strategic mind and heroic actions in the face of disaster. His military career spanned more than 2 decades, during which he earned countless medals and accolades for his bravery, leadership, and dedication to humanitarian causes. However, when his wife passed away from illness and his daughter was already beginning her career as a doctor, Miguel decided it was time to leave the life he had known. He moved to the United States, hoping for a fresh start in a place where his daughter's career could flourish, and his efforts could provide financial support for her hospital work. But here, in the sprawling Imperial Towers Hotel, Miguel had found a job that kept him hidden behind the scenes, his military career buried deep beneath the surface. The other hotel staff never knew of his past. No one knew about the military strategies he once devised or the countless lives he saved during natural disasters. His daughter, Lisa, who had been devastated by her mother's death, had always encouraged him to pursue something more fitting for his stature. But Miguel had chosen this path because it allowed him to live a quiet life while providing for her future. Every day, Miguel walked through the grand entrance of the hotel with the same calm precision that had once made him a respected officer. As he cleaned, his mind would sometimes drift back to the many operations he had led, the battles he had faced, and the leadership lessons he had learned through years of service. Those memories were important to him, but they were also part of a life he no longer lived. Here in Los Angeles, he was just another worker, another man quietly cleaning and maintaining the hotel's grand appearance. But all of that would change the day Richard Blake, the hotel manager, decided to make an example of him. Richard Blake, a man in his early 40s, was the embodiment of what most people expected a hotel manager to be: authoritative, impeccably dressed, and convinced that his position of power gave him the right to speak down to those beneath him. Blake had always seen the hotel staff as little more than tools to ensure the hotel ran smoothly. He often forgot, or chose to ignore, the fact that it was the workers like Miguel who made everything function seamlessly behind the scenes. That particular morning started like any other. The lobby was quiet as the early morning sun began to pour through the large windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Miguel was busy wiping down a set of brass railings near the front desk when he noticed Blake walking toward him. He didn't hear Blake's footsteps approach, but he felt the manager's gaze on him. "Miguel," Blake's sharp voice cut through the stillness of the lobby like a knife. "You missed a spot here." He pointed to a tiny speck of dust on the brass railing that Miguel had just cleaned. Miguel looked up and saw Blake standing in front of him, his arms crossed, a frown plastered on his face. Without skipping a beat, Miguel simply nodded and replied in his soft Filipino accent, "My apologies, Mr. Blake. I will take care of it." Blake didn't let up, his voice rising a little louder, no doubt intending to make sure others around could hear his reprimand. "You've been here long enough, Miguel. We're supposed to run a 5-star hotel, not a mess hall. Can't even clean a simple railing properly. You need to be more careful." He turned to the other hotel staff who were nearby, his tone now dripping with condescension. "We can't afford mistakes like this. We have high-profile guests arriving today. Get it together, Miguel." Miguel didn't respond. He simply walked back to the spot Blake had pointed to and, without a word, wiped it clean. The other hotel employees exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one dared to speak up. Everyone knew that Blake had a way of humiliating people, especially the foreign workers, but they also knew that it was better to keep quiet and avoid attracting his attention. Most of the Filipino cleaning staff, who had worked under Blake for years, had learned to take his insults without protest. But none of them understood how Miguel remained unshaken by his treatment. He never cried, never vented, never complained during breaks, and never let the insults affect his work. "What's your secret?" Rosario, a seasoned housekeeper who had worked at the Imperial Towers for over 15 years, asked Miguel later that day in the break room as they sat down to eat. "How do you stay so calm when Blake treats you like that?" Miguel glanced at her, his eyes softening for a brief moment. "There are worse things than harsh words," he replied simply, his voice low and composed. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile before continuing his lunch, his expression never changing. Rosario didn't press further. She knew Miguel wouldn't say much about his past. He never did. But his ability to endure Blake's harsh treatment without breaking was something Rosario and everyone else could never quite figure out. As Miguel continued his work that day, he thought little of Blake's insults. To him, it was just another challenge to face. He had faced far worse in his military career, and nothing Blake said or did could compare to the weight of the decisions he had once made in the service of his country. But here, in the quiet halls of the Imperial Towers, Miguel had a different mission. It wasn't about battles or medals. It was about ensuring a better future for his daughter and maintaining his quiet dignity. Little did he know that dignity was about to be tested in ways he could never have imagined. Another long day of work came to an end at the Imperial Towers Hotel, and Miguel Cruz walked out through the service entrance, the cool night air of Los Angeles a welcome contrast to the busy, bustling interior of the hotel. The soft hum of the city filled his ears as he made his way toward his modest apartment, just a few blocks away. Miguel had worked hard, as he did every day, making sure every inch of the grand hotel was spotless, from the marble floors to the polished brass fixtures. The hotel was a place of opulence, a sharp contrast to his simple life. His apartment was nothing like the grandeur of the Imperial Towers. It was small, one bedroom with an old couch and a tiny kitchen. It wasn't much, but it was home. A place where he could leave the stress of the hotel behind and try to unwind, even if only for a few hours before starting another day of work. As he entered the apartment, the familiar scent of incense filled the air, offering him a sense of peace. It was a fragrance he always kept burning, a comfort from his homeland. Miguel placed his keys on the kitchen counter, his mind already starting to wander. He had been so focused on his work that he hadn't given much thought to anything else all day. But as soon as he stepped into the quiet of his apartment, the weight of his past began to settle on his shoulders. It was a past that no one at the hotel knew about. No one ever saw him as anything more than just another cleaner. They didn't know that Miguel Cruz had once been a respected general in the Philippine Army, a leader who had served his country for over 2 decades. He didn't often think about it, not because he was ashamed, but because his past was a different life, a life that was now far behind him. After the sudden death of his husband, Ricardo, Miguel had chosen to start over. He had moved to the U.S. to live closer to his daughter, Lisa, who was already building her own career as a doctor. His military career, while full of pride and accomplishment, had felt like something that belonged to someone else, not to the man who now worked in a hotel. But tonight, as he had done on so many evenings before, Miguel found himself drawn to the small wooden shelf in the corner of his apartment. There, hidden from view, was a box that contained everything he once was, everything he had once fought for. Miguel had made a promise to himself that he would never forget his past, but he had also promised that it would not define him. He wasn't the same man who had commanded troops in the Philippines. He was a father, a man who worked tirelessly for the future of his daughter. Still, there were nights like tonight when he couldn't help but revisit that part of his life. Miguel walked over to the shelf, gently lifting the box from its place and sitting down on the couch. The box was small, unassuming, but to him, it held the weight of a lifetime. He opened it carefully, taking a deep breath before his eyes fell on the contents. Inside were his military uniforms, still folded neatly despite the years, a collection of medals and photographs from his days in the army. There was a silver-plated frame with a photo of him standing proudly next to his fellow officers. He was in full uniform, his chest adorned with numerous medals, his face serious and composed. That man in the photo was a far cry from the Miguel Cruz who worked in the hotel today. The man in the photo had been respected, admired, even feared. He had been a leader, someone who made life and death decisions every day, someone who had commanded hundreds of soldiers. Miguel picked up one of the photos, a faded picture of him and his late husband, Ricardo, both of them in military uniforms, standing side by side with a group of officers. Their smiles were genuine, their love for each other clear in their eyes. Ricardo had been more than just his partner in life. He had been his partner in service. Together, they had tackled numerous military operations, from counterterrorism missions in Mindanao to peacekeeping efforts in disaster-stricken areas. Miguel had led the way, and Ricardo had been by his side every step of the way. They had been an unstoppable team. Miguel's fingers traced the edges of the photo, and memories flooded back. He thought of the countless hours spent in the jungles of the Philippines, coordinating search and rescue operations during floods and typhoons. He remembered the tense moments in the field, when he had to remain calm while others panicked, when every decision could mean life or death for the soldiers under his command. He had been awarded several medals for his bravery and leadership, including the prestigious Medal of Valor, which had been pinned to his chest by the President of the Philippines himself. His career had been marked by achievements, by moments that had defined who he was as a soldier and a man, but those moments felt distant now. The medals and ribbons that once symbolized his strength now sat in a box, reminders of a life that seemed so far removed from the man he was today. Miguel closed the box and set it down on the coffee table. He didn't need to keep looking at it. He had spent years burying that life, but it still lived inside him, just beneath the surface. He stood up, walking over to a small altar where a framed photograph of Ricardo sat alongside a crucifix. It was a place of quiet reflection, a way for Miguel to stay connected to his past without letting it consume him. He placed his hand gently on the frame, closing his eyes for a moment. "Another day, Ricardo," he whispered softly, a small smile crossing his face. "Another day." There was no grand ceremony for his memories, no dramatic revelation of the man he had once been. For Miguel, the past was something he carried with him quietly, like the heavy metals that weighed on his chest in another life. His decision to leave the Philippines hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. He had to let go of the soldier in him and embrace the role of a father, a provider, and a quiet worker in a hotel far from home. Miguel went to the kitchen and prepared a simple meal for himself. It wasn't much, just rice and vegetables, a meal he had grown accustomed to after years of military rations. As he sat down to eat, his phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "How was your day, Papa?" the message read. A warm smile spread across Miguel's face as he typed a quick reply, telling her about his day at the hotel and asking about her work at the hospital. It was moments like these that made everything worth it. He was supporting her from a distance, helping her achieve her dreams, just as he had always wanted to do. When he finished eating, Miguel sat back on the couch, his thoughts drifting back to his time in the army. It wasn't that he regretted leaving. His life now, though quieter, had its own purpose. But he knew that the experiences he had in the military, his leadership, his sense of duty, had shaped the man he was today. And though he might have left his uniform behind, it would always be a part of him. Miguel's phone buzzed again, this time a message from his daughter. "Papa, the children's ward project is moving ahead. We're almost there." Miguel smiled and looked out the window, where the lights of the city twinkled in the distance. Tomorrow would be another day, and he would face it with the same quiet determination that had served him well for so many years. This was the life he had chosen, and it was one he could be proud of. Miguel Cruz had always kept to himself at the Imperial Towers Hotel. His job as a cleaner was simple: clean the rooms, maintain the hotel's shine, and stay out of the spotlight. He was content with his quiet routine, having left his past as a decorated general in the Philippine Army far behind. But one morning, everything changed. The hotel was unusually quiet, the calm before the storm of check-ins. Miguel was polishing the brass fixtures in the lobby when he overheard the heated conversation between manager Richard Blake and head of security, Bradley. They were discussing missing items from the presidential suite. "We have to figure out who took them," Blake's voice rang out. "A designer watch, an iPad, and a high-end pen were in that room. This is serious." Miguel froze as Blake's gaze locked onto him. "Cruz," Blake called sharply, "you were the last to clean that room. Do you have something to say about the missing items?" Miguel's heart skipped. He had cleaned the room, but there was no way he had taken anything. His calm, professional demeanor began to crack as Blake's accusation cut through the usual hum of hotel activity. "I didn't take anything, Mr. Blake," Miguel responded, his voice steady but firm. "I did my job as usual. I didn't see anything missing." Blake's eyes narrowed, unrelenting. "We've checked the security footage, Cruz. You were the last one in the room. It doesn't look good." He turned to Bradley. "Search his locker." Miguel stood still, his chest tight, as Bradley began rifling through his personal belongings. His locker was small, filled only with his work clothes, a few personal items, and nothing that could explain the missing items. "There's nothing here," Bradley said after a few minutes, his voice uncertain, but Blake didn't seem convinced. Check his bag, Blake insisted. Miguel stood motionless as Bradley opened his bag. The contents, a wallet, a phone charger, a few snacks, were exactly what he had expected. But the discomfort of the search gnawed at him. The fact that Blake was still accusing him felt wrong. He had worked here for years, never having taken anything, yet here he was, being treated as a criminal. After a tense silence, Blake gave a frustrated sigh. "We'll continue the investigation," he said dismissively. "But Cruz, this won't go unnoticed. You've been underperforming lately anyway." Miguel nodded without protest, though his mind was racing. What was going on? Why was Blake so adamant that it was him? His shift continued in a haze, the accusation still hanging over him like a dark cloud. No one spoke to him. He could feel his colleagues' eyes on him, some filled with suspicion, others with pity, but none willing to stand up to Blake. Hours later, Miguel was still reeling when Mrs. Chen, the hotel owner, arrived unexpectedly. She rarely made her presence known, but today she was here to address the theft situation. "Mr. Blake," she said calmly, her gaze sharp, "I've been made aware of the situation. The investigation is complete." Blake looked unsettled. "What do you mean, Mrs. Chen?" "The missing items were found in your office, Mr. Blake," Mrs. Chen stated flatly. The room went quiet. Miguel's heart skipped a beat. "Blake, the items were found in Blake's office." Blake turned pale, his earlier confidence slipping away. "I didn't," Mrs. Chen interrupted him. "There's no place for dishonesty here. Your actions are unacceptable. I've already spoken to the board. We will be taking appropriate action." Miguel stood still, absorbing the shock of what he had just heard. The items had been planted in Blake's office. He had been wrongfully accused for something he didn't do. Miguel had never stolen a thing, and now it was clear who the real thief was. Mrs. Chen turned to Miguel, her expression softening. "I want you to know that the matter is resolved. You've been cleared of any wrongdoing. There was no evidence against you." Miguel simply nodded, trying to absorb the relief that was slowly washing over him. Though his name had been cleared, the humiliation of being accused remained. But then, Mrs. Chen spoke again, her voice carrying an unexpected weight. "There's something else you should all know," she continued, addressing the room full of hotel staff. "Miguel Cruz is not just a hotel cleaner. He's a retired general from the Philippine Army. He is a decorated officer who served his country with distinction." Blake's jaw dropped, his face a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Miguel's colleagues, who had been avoiding him all day, now looked at him in shock. Mrs. Chen's words had completely shifted the perception of who Miguel was. To them, he was no longer just the quiet man cleaning the hallways. He was a leader, a decorated general, someone with a past far more significant than they had ever imagined. Miguel stood quietly as Mrs. Chen revealed his past. He had never shared his military background with anyone at the hotel, preferring to keep it private. But now, with Mrs. Chen's words, everyone knew. He felt the weight of their gaze, but he didn't let it show. He wasn't here for the recognition or the applause. He was here to work and to provide for his daughter. Blake, now visibly uncomfortable, stammered. "But I didn't know." Mrs. Chen's gaze was steely. "Miguel has earned the respect of many, and you should be ashamed of how you treated him. Your actions have consequences, Mr. Blake." Blake opened his mouth, but no words came out. He knew he had lost. Mrs. Chen continued, her voice steady. "Miguel will remain with the hotel, and from now on, he will be treated with the respect he deserves." Miguel nodded, his heart still racing but a sense of pride settling in. The truth had come to light, and while it had been difficult to be accused of something he didn't do, he knew he had done the right thing by staying silent and letting the truth unfold. As Blake slunk away, his job hanging in the balance, Miguel turned to his colleagues, who now looked at him differently. The room felt a little less heavy. No longer was he just a cleaner. He was Miguel Cruz, a man with a story to tell, one that didn't need to be spoken aloud to be understood. The past had a way of finding its place, and for Miguel, it had been revealed in the most unexpected way. But now he was free of the false accusations and free to stand tall, knowing that the truth was finally on his side. Miguel Cruz's life at the Imperial Towers Hotel had changed dramatically. After the truth about his past was revealed, Mrs. Chen, the hotel's owner, wasted no time recognizing Miguel's potential. She had seen his quiet strength during the crisis and his ability to remain composed in the face of adversity. That was why, when she offered him a leadership position in the hotel's human resources department, it didn't come as a complete surprise. It was time for him to make a difference in a new way. "Miguel," Mrs. Chen began, "I've been impressed with your leadership in difficult situations. I want to offer you the role of human resources manager, replacing Blake. I believe you have the experience and character to lead this hotel's staff, particularly our immigrant workers, and help them succeed." Miguel stood still for a moment, processing the weight of her words. A leadership position. He had never expected something like this, but he had never been one to shy away from responsibility. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen," he replied quietly. "I won't let you down." Miguel accepted the role with the same quiet determination he had always shown. His first task was clear: transform the hotel's work environment, especially for the immigrant staff, who made up a large portion of the workforce. He knew firsthand how difficult it could be to start over in a foreign country. He had faced those challenges himself when he moved to the U.S. to support his daughter. Now, it was his turn to help others. Miguel began by meeting with employees across all departments, listening to their concerns and ideas. He quickly learned that many workers felt stuck in low-paying positions with little opportunity for growth. He decided to change that. First, he implemented a more transparent communication system. He held regular feedback sessions where employees could voice their opinions and suggestions for improvement. He wanted everyone to feel heard, no matter their role. Then, Miguel introduced a scholarship program to give employees the opportunity to further their education and improve their skills. This initiative would allow hotel staff to pursue additional training or degrees, opening doors for career advancement. Miguel believed that investing in the people who worked for the hotel was the key to its long-term success. The scholarship program was an immediate success. Employees who had previously felt stuck in dead-end jobs now saw a way forward. Some enrolled in management courses, others sought language improvement classes, and many took advantage of the opportunity to earn certifications. Miguel's vision was clear: everyone should have the chance to succeed, regardless of their background. As Miguel continued to implement these changes, the hotel began to feel different. Staff morale improved, and the atmosphere became more positive. People were motivated to work harder, knowing that there was a real opportunity for advancement. Miguel's leadership style, based on fairness, respect, and understanding, created an environment where employees felt valued. He also made sure to emphasize mentorship. Experienced staff members were paired with newer employees to provide guidance and support. This fostered a sense of camaraderie and teamwork that hadn't existed before. Miguel encouraged the hotel's leadership team to take an active role in helping others grow. And slowly but surely, the culture of the hotel began to shift. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. Word spread throughout the industry about the changes taking place at the Imperial Towers. The hotel became known for its progressive policies, employee satisfaction, and the opportunities it provided for its workers. Other hotels began to take note, and Miguel was invited to share his insights at industry conferences, where he talked about the importance of employee development and creating a fair, inclusive workplace. But for Miguel, The real reward was in seeing the positive impact on his colleagues. His background in the military had taught him the importance of leadership, strategy, and working toward a common goal. Now, he was using those skills to help others build better lives for themselves. He had always believed that true leadership wasn't about holding a title, it was about inspiring others to be the best they could be. The scholarship program continued to grow, and Miguel began to see the fruits of his efforts. Several of the hotel's staff members had moved into higher-paying roles, and many had completed their education or gained valuable certifications. The hotel's leadership was stronger, and the atmosphere among the staff was one of mutual respect and ambition. Miguel's transformation of the hotel was evident. The Imperial Towers Hotel wasn't just a place for guests to stay. It had become a place where employees could thrive. The changes he had put in place had created an environment where everyone had the chance to succeed, where hard work and dedication were rewarded. As Miguel sat in his new office, looking out over the bustling lobby below, he felt a quiet pride in what he had accomplished. It had taken time, effort, and patience, but the results were undeniable. He had not only cleared his name but had also created a legacy at the hotel, a legacy of opportunity, fairness, and respect. It wasn't about the position he held, it was about the difference he had made in the lives of those around him. And that, he knew, was the true measure of success. The truth about Richard Blake had finally come to light. After the investigation into the missing items revealed that Blake had planted them in his own office, the repercussions were swift. Mrs. Chen wasted no time in making her decision. She had always held herself to a high standard of integrity and fairness, and Blake's actions had not only broken the trust of his colleagues, but also undermined the hotel's values. The day after the investigation concluded, Blake was called into Mrs. Chen's office. The staff had already begun to whisper about the fate of their manager, and the tension in the air was palpable. Miguel, who had remained composed throughout the entire ordeal, stood back and watched as Blake was escorted out of the hotel. His expression was one of quiet satisfaction, not because of Blake's downfall, but because justice had been served. As Blake left, there were no grand words from Miguel. He didn't need to speak. The humiliation of being publicly ousted, the disgrace of his actions, was punishment enough. For Miguel, this moment was not about revenge. It was about fairness, integrity, and the unwavering belief that every person deserved respect, no matter their position in life. Blake's firing was a watershed moment for the hotel, signaling a shift in the workplace culture. The environment, which had once been filled with whispered complaints and whispered fears of retaliation, was now open and honest. Miguel had been the catalyst for this change, not only because he had been wrongly accused and exonerated, but because he had demonstrated what true leadership and dignity looked like. For Miguel, life continued to move forward. With his new role in human resources, he felt a sense of responsibility he had never known before. He now held the power to make sure that the staff, especially the immigrant workers, felt valued and had opportunities to advance. He knew what it was like to be treated as invisible, to be underestimated based on appearance or position. His rise from a humble worker to a leader was proof that anyone could change their circumstances with determination and the right opportunities. Miguel became a role model to his colleagues. They admired his patience, his quiet strength, and the grace with which he handled everything that had been thrown his way. Even as he continued to contribute to the hotel's operations, Miguel made it clear that his most important job was ensuring that every employee had the chance to be heard and treated fairly. Through his leadership, Miguel showed that every job had value, no matter how small it may seem. He made sure his colleagues knew they were essential to the hotel's success, and he advocated for a work environment where people were treated with respect and kindness. He encouraged those around him to believe in their own potential and to never settle for less than what they deserved. Miguel also took the opportunity to reconnect with his roots. He never fully abandoned his military career or the lessons he had learned in service. While he focused on his new role, he continued to support the military community, attending conferences and events where he shared his story of transformation and leadership. His experiences as a general had shaped him into the man he was today, and he believed it was important to give back to those who had helped him along the way. In time, Miguel's story became a symbol of resilience and change. His colleagues often turned to him for advice and inspiration, not just in matters of work but in life. They saw in him a man who had faced adversity with dignity, a man who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. His story resonated with people from all walks of life, and his message was simple: anyone could change their circumstances if they were given the chance. All it took was hard work, perseverance, and the belief that they deserved better. Miguel's impact on the hotel was profound. Under his leadership, the atmosphere became one of collaboration and support. No longer were employees afraid to speak up about their concerns, knowing that Miguel was there to listen. He worked tirelessly to ensure that the hotel was a place where everyone could succeed, where respect was the foundation upon which the entire operation was built. But perhaps the most significant change Miguel brought was in the way the hotel's leadership approached their own roles. After his promotion, many of the managers began to reflect on their own behavior, questioning how they could be more inclusive, more compassionate, and more supportive of their staff. Miguel had led by example, and his colleagues couldn't help but follow suit. As the weeks turned into months, the transformation of the Imperial Towers Hotel became more and more apparent. Employee satisfaction soared, turnover rates dropped, and the hotel's reputation as a fair and progressive employer spread throughout the industry. Miguel's influence was evident in every corner of the hotel, from the front desk to the housekeeping staff. He had created an environment where every worker, no matter their background, felt like they had a future and were appreciated for their contributions. Through all the changes, Miguel remained humble. He never sought recognition or praise for the work he had done. For him, the real reward was seeing his colleagues succeed. His legacy wasn't in the titles he held or the accolades he received. It was in the lives he had touched, the opportunities he had created, and the respect he had earned from those around him. Miguel's journey had started as a humble cleaner in a grand hotel, but it had evolved into something far more meaningful. He had demonstrated that fairness, respect, and dedication were the true foundations of success. And as he looked out over the hotel lobby one evening, seeing the smiles of employees who had grown because of his guidance, he knew that his mission was far from over. He had come a long way from his days as a general in the Philippine Army, but the values he had learned there, loyalty, service, and leadership, had never left him. Now, as he led the Imperial Towers Hotel, he was shaping a new generation of leaders, all of them equipped with the same belief that with the right opportunities, anyone could achieve success. And in that quiet moment, Miguel Cruz smiled to himself. He had not only changed his own life but had transformed the lives of those around him. That, he knew, was the true measure of success.